When you imagine a top-rated first-person shooter, you may imagine one of the titans of the genre, Call of Duty or Battlefield or Halo, but in fact those series don't even touch the top 10 highest-rated games on Steam. Of those top 10, only 4 can be considered FPS games. 3 of those 4 are Valve originals. Each of the Portal games takes up a spot at ranks 1 and 7, and at rank 9 we have Half-Life Alyx. However, the Portal series are puzzle games. While technically an FPS in that you play from a first-person perspective and shoot portals, they aren't what you would normally think of as shooters. Half-Life Alyx, on the other hand, can absolutely be considered a shooter in the traditional sense, but to play it you have to have a virtual reality setup, and therefore the audience will always be relatively small when compared to other games. So, if you've read the title of the video, you know we're going to be taking a look at number 10 on the list. Ultrakill is a shooter in the truest sense, which is to say your main form of interaction with the world is via the barrel of your gun. You could call it a Doom clone and be absolutely correct. The game successfully takes what made the Doom reboot games fun and iterates on them to make something even better. However, while that's true, it's also not the whole story. So, what can we learn from the game as developers? Important to any game is game feel. There isn't one definition for game feel. In some games it can come in the form of tight controls, while in others it'll be in the form of satisfying visual feedback, and in others it'll be excellent sound design. In a broad definition, we can think of game feel as what makes this game satisfying to play. When starting Ultrakill, one of the first things you'll notice is how fast you move and turn.
Whoa! Oh no, this is gonna be a fast game, ain't it? Sorry, my brain is like overstimulated right now because this game is already moving so fucking fast for me.
Tutorials are one of those things that developers tend to be split on adding. On one hand, controls should be largely intuitive. On the other, to assume your player will be able to intuit everything is a horrible assumption to make, because players will inevitably miss something even when that thing is very clearly presented to them. Ultrakill is absolutely a game which needs a tutorial. While the controls are largely intuitive to anybody who's played a shooter before, the game feel is so different that it takes some getting used to. The way Ultrakill gets around this is by drip feeding the tutorial to the player. The very first level is a safe environment to teach the basics of movement and healing, but after that you're thrown into the thick of it. After all, one of the best ways to learn is to play. Each level will introduce to you something new, whether explicitly stated or not. This results in a slow ramp up of your power as the player, each feature building on the others. Simultaneously, the challenges you face ramp up as well to keep things interesting. This turns what in some games is a chore into a satisfying reward for the player as they're introduced to new tools and weapons. But just as important as the features you're explicitly told are those which you can discover on your own. Ultrakill is one of those rare games in which the player can ask, "Wouldn't it be cool if?" And the game readily responds with, "Yes, it would." See, one of the main things you'll notice when playing is the style meter. If you want, you can absolutely ignore it. You can play the game with what's explicitly told to you and still have a great playthrough. But that's not how the game is really meant to be played, and the style meter reflects that. If you go out of your way to experiment, you can often find faster ways to deal with encounters. This could be shooting your coins with something other than your revolver, dealing extra damage as a result. Or this could be learning that you can punch your own shotgun blasts, resulting in an explosion which clears a bunch of enemies at once. And the style meter recognizes this. The game feel of Ultrakill is one which rewards skillful play and game knowledge. Even the very basic mechanic of healing is one which needs to be implemented skillfully. You heal from the blood of your enemy, so when you're hurt you need to dodge, dip, duck, dive, and dodge to get in close and land a hit. If you get in close and take a few hits in the process, you build up hard damage, limiting the amount you can heal. This results in punishing carelessness while promoting the style of play that the game revolves around. But all of this technique and skill would be wasted on encounters which aren't a challenge. A key aspect to game feel is how difficult the game is. If a player is presented with a challenge that seems unbeatable, they'll more than likely just quit. After all, why bother yourself with something that's literally impossible? Any developer can create an unbeatable game, but it's much harder from a development standpoint to create challenges which are undoubtedly hard but fair. But if you can, then you're much more likely to keep your players hooked in. Ultrakill and many other hard but fair games do this through the idea of using certain bosses as gatekeepers to the rest of the game. The first boss of the first level will be difficult when you fight it for the first time, but soon after you beat it, it becomes a normal enemy in most levels afterwards. But because you spent time fighting it alone and learned its moveset, it's significantly easier to deal with. And the game does this again, and again, and again. However, it's not like you're facing challenge after challenge non-stop. Often after facing one of these gatekeepers, the game will pull back on the difficulty to let you get your bearings. This is to subconsciously show yourself that you're getting better at the game. Enemies you might have had difficulty with aren't so bad, and getting to effortlessly beat something that you once had trouble with is always fun. Ultrakill then takes this idea and structures every challenge around it. Difficulty is a subjective thing, but one way we can approximate it is to see what enemies are in each level. To chart this, I went ahead and manually counted every enemy in each level for both the Prelude and Act 1, and then used that enemy's health as a weight. The result is this chart, which shows us the total health of enemies in each level, subdivided by enemy type. With this, we can see when new foes are introduced, for example, the drones in level 1-1, or the street cleaners in level 1-2. We can also see when bosses are introduced as gatekeepers, such as the malicious face in 0-1 being reintroduced as a normal enemy in 0-4, and then pretty often in most levels afterwards. You can also see the bosses at 1-4, 2-4, and 3-2 seem to be out of place. V2 and Gabriel's difficulty don't come from them being tanky, but rather from the fact they're significantly faster than every other enemy in the game. If you can manage to hit them, you can pretty readily whittle them down, but the lesson in those fights is learning how to be able to hit them. The corpse of King Minos is the exact opposite. He's a giant, slow-moving damage sponge. Depending on your playstyle, he can teach a few different lessons, but each is helpful in its own way. Around these gatekeepers, you have levels with significantly higher enemy variety. These are the points where the game lets you practice everything you've learned, dashing around arenas, clearing wave after wave. Their difficulty comes not from having a handful of strong enemies, but rather a plethora of weak ones. These encounters are chances to style on your enemies in a game that is all about style. Style is one of those things that has many forms, and in most ways I'd say Ultrakill executes its style quite well. One of the keys to this is the distinction between graphics and aesthetics. Graphically, it's not particularly impressive, and the very first choice you get to make is if you want to make it look even more retro. All the models are low poly and low resolution, specifically calling back to early 3D consoles like the PlayStation 1. And yet, it's one of the more striking games I've played in recent memory. A major part of this is how each zone has a unique identity. From the cramped halls of the Prelude to the blatant facade of Limbo, the expansive skyline of Lust to the jiggly walls of Gluttony. Each zone has a recognizable appearance, level design which complements that appearance, and a soundtrack that I'd imagine even some AAA studios are envious of. Couple this with gameplay which is clearly inspired by that which came before without being a clone or a ripoff, and you get a love letter to those that inspired the game. But that's when the game is taking itself seriously. Just as charming as when you go back for a second playthrough and start secret hunting. Each chapter has a hidden level with a different theme, but even outside that, you can still find silly jokes if you look for them. Everything about this game oozes style, and the fact that it can be enjoyed by different audiences is a big reason for its success. From casual players to speedrunners, secret hunters to shitposters, Ultrakill has a little bit of something for everyone. So let's loop it back. As developers, what can we learn from this game? Well, my main takeaways are threefold. First, giving the player options for how they can play is always good. In a game like Ultrakill, this is achieved with a high skill ceiling, a versatile kit of tools, and various things which give the game good replayability. However, for our own games, we need to understand what that means, as this idea can be executed very differently depending on what kind of game we're trying to make. Second, we should understand what is driving the fun in our game. The structure of Ultrakill's encounters goes hand in hand with the previous point. Each level, you will more than likely learn a new mechanic to work with and steadily increase your skill at the game. This allows for manipulation of the difficulty curve from level to level to keep the player engaged without overwhelming them. Just as important is respecting the player's time. Before most encounters is a checkpoint. If the player dies, this allows them to get right back into the action without a long run or backtracking, preventing dull and repetitive sections. Third, we should strive to give our game a sense of identity. If we were to strip Ultrakill back to its minimum viable product, ditching the art, music, and so on, we would undoubtedly be left with a game that is still fun. However, those features are what elevate a good game to a great one. The mechanics, when combined with the retro art style, the adaptive post-rock soundtrack, and environments which bring all these elements together, create a unique experience you can't really compare to anything else. Well, except for the games which themselves are inspired by Ultrakill, but that's a topic all its own. All in all, I can without a doubt recommend Ultrakill as a game that is worth your time, both because it's a fun game in general, and because it presents an interesting case study when compared to games that came before it, like Doom. I'd like to thank you guys for watching. As I try to pick up the pace on making videos, I figured I'd try a different format from what I've already done. If you enjoyed, be sure to like the video, and if there are other games you'd like me to cover in a similar manner, be sure to comment them down below. To catch the next video, be sure to subscribe too. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.